Madame Marie Antoinette, A Soul Misunderstood. A biography of Marie Antoinette and her contribution to the French Revolution by Calista LeGault. Born in Vienna, Austria, as the last daughter to the Empress Maria Theresa and her husband, Emperor Francis I, little Marie Antoinette was raised with the single intention of one day becoming a royal bride. Ingrained in her everyday thoughts were etiquette on a plethora of subjects, ranging from diplomacy, flirtation, to the constant protection of her virginal purity. At the mild age of just 14 years old, Marie would marry into one of the most powerful families in the world, the royal French monarchy. She would one day become the last queen of France. Perhaps more notably than that, she would one day become the propaganda and the hatred that fueled a violent revolution which would lead to the fall of the French monarchy and an uncanny death for herself. When Marie Antoinette first arrived at the Palace of Versailles in 1770 is when her story truly began. All seemed amazing, as the people of France regarded her as a symbol for utter beauty and innocence. She was the bride of the Dauphin, King Louis XVI. As quoted by Nancy M. Baker, Marie Antoinette was a burst of pageantry orchestrated by the government and reported in the official press. She was the object of a kind of cult in which she was worshipped as a deity. Anytime there would be a public appearance, the crowds would flock to see the beautiful and extraordinarily young bride that was providing an alliance between France and Austria. But it wasn't long before things started to take a bit of a turn. Perhaps one of the first issues that the young bride would encounter in the walls of the magnificent Versailles were that of her husband and his inability to consummate the marriage. According to documents of the time, Marie seemed to have no credible knowledge of sex and her importance to provide an heir to the throne as soon as possible. Her brother, the Austrian emperor, had to pay a royal visit to King Louis XVI himself. In a private conversation, the emperor encouraged bedroom activity between the young king and his young bride. In a palace well full of gossiping mouths and jealous eyes, the young queen's every action was antagonized and ridiculed. Her list of haters included Louis XV's unmarried daughters, important ministers, the king's personal mistress, and other workers in the palace. When Marie had arranged for a group of her closest friends and companions to view a sunrise, an innocent experience enough, the Lever de Loi pamphlets urgently appeared to the public. This would begin a vicious and horrifying cycle of Marie Antoinette's reputation being gutted for years to follow. The writer highlighted Marie Antoinette's whimsical and adventurous personality and presented her as something of a whore to the public. He emphasized speculation regarding the childless king and queen. The writer stressed the king's medical issue of what is most similar to modern-day erectile dysfunction. This, of course, added suspicion to the presumption that Marie may have been sneaking off with other men around Versailles. However, the pamphlets succeeded in tarnishing the young queen's reputation with the common folk of Paris. These pamphlets, the king and queen became the center of all jokes. Marie was devastated and embarrassed. A pamphlet written in 1774 showed made-up conversations between Marie and her mother. In the pamphlet, her mother tells her to restore the throne and provide an heir, no matter whose child it may be. The anonymous writer of the pamphlets wrote, "Remember that she is Austrian, and so is ambitious. Remember of what mother she is born, and who will be her able confederate in such schemes." In 1778, the queen became pregnant by Louis XVI. Typically, this would have been an utterly joyful and exciting experience to soon welcome a possible new heir. However, the pamphlets circulating through the city of Paris made this an unbearable experience. Calling her a runaround, the children were expected to be anyone else's but the king's. The pamphlets placed a lot of emphasis on Marie having extracurricular escapades with King Louis's younger brother, Artois. There is no doubt that these pamphlets filled with devious lies single-handedly ruined not only the reputation of Marie Antoinette and King Louis, but discredited their entire monarchy and credibility to rule the throne. Ridicule and hatred that was typically centered towards the king's mistress had now become Marie Antoinette's problem. With France in a crippling state financially, for the common people to see the queen attending the theater in her marvelous gowns, extravagant hairstyles, and golden horse carriages, it was enough to set them over the edge. While Marie Antoinette was by no means the monster the press made her out to be, it was no secret that she was extremely frivolous in her spending. She was irresponsible with her expenses, especially considering the large division that widely separated the rich from the poor. In 1786, a jeweler from an appraised jewelry store, Baumer and Passages, in the middle of Paris, wrote a letter to Marie, complaining about the prestigious diamond necklace that she had never paid off. The jeweler started by informing the queen's handler of the initial problem, the cost of the necklace. It cost 1,600,000 livres, even though it cost us more to make it. Nevertheless, we were determined to sell the necklace, and told him that we would be very happy that Her Majesty would wear the jewel. The Queen's fashion advisor and handler told the merchants that the price would be too high to pay in full, so instead they would rely on a system of installments and interest. Fair enough. However, after this, the advisor informed them that she would be giving it back to them unless if they decreased the price to 200,000, a considerably lowered amount. The jeweler's next letter writes, "The prince promised us that he would mention these facts to the Queen. A few days later, he told us that Her Majesty had accepted our last settlements. Instead of receiving 400,000, we would soon receive 700,000, which would allow us to honor our commitments." The jewelers were content with this agreement because, after all, the royal majesty would be wearing their piece. However, as it turned out, in October of 1786, the first payment was only 30,000 livres. This would be the last payment Marie Antoinette would ever make on this very expensive necklace. As the truth has come out on this scandalized exchange, it has been found that Marie never arranged to have the necklace in the first place. All of these efforts were made with the ill intent of making her look extremely irresponsible with money. The primary characters of this devious plot were Cardinal de Rohan, who gullibly ended his credit to buy the necklace, Madame de la Motte, the orchestrator of the entire plan, Marie Antoinette, who was innocent, and the jewelers, also innocent. La Motte was found to have been guilty in creating this plot, and after escaping from prison with the help of Marie Antoinette's enemies, she wrote numerous pamphlets saying that the wicked queen had lured her to the Petite Trianon, entrapped her, and then introduced her to sapphic pleasures. After the La Motte pamphlets came out, the Queen took on a new view, at least in the public eye, as a Satanist, a demonic, lesbian, nymphomaniac, alcoholic, who could not be trusted. This is what kicked the French Revolution into high gear. The people of France wanted change, and they wanted to face the blame for their problems. Marie Antoinette was their outlet of hatred that inspired an end to the monarchy in France. A British traveler by the name of Arthur Young visited Paris and Versailles in the year 1787 and explains his unusual findings in the palace in the city of Paris. He's shocked after taking a tour of the king's quarters and finding what filth he actually lives in. He's even more surprised that the workers as well as the royal family would allow the public to see the quarters in such disarray. Hoping for one more scandal, the traveler asked the tour guides if he can view the Queen's quarters. "I desire to see the Queen's apartments, but I could not. Is Her Majesty in it?" "No." "Well, then why not see it as well as the King's?" The lady replied, "Because, sir, that's another thing altogether." He notices that although the reputation of Versailles is quite extensive, he's rather disappointed at the grounds surrounding the palace. He states that they look no greater than a farmer's horse pond. As time passes, the pamphlets released to the public only become more grotesque and more damaging to Marie Antoinette's character. The public declares her as a witch, a monster, and maybe worst of all, an incestuous rapist mother. The 1789 libel, translated as "The Austrian Bitch and Her Friends in the Royal Orgy," is as explosive as the title suggests. This series of pamphlets focuses on Marie Antoinette's relationship with the Count of Artois, the king's brother. Many have already believed their son to truly be Artois' son, due to pamphlets from previous years. The stories are provocative and atrocious, and yet the French people eat them up. Perhaps the shortage of bread in France increased their need for good gossip. Before the king and queen were forced to move to Paris, in a night of fiery rage, the people of Paris surround Versailles with burning stakes and fishermen knives. They want the king and queen to see the poverty and feel the hunger that many were feeling in that moment. The king and queen attempted to escape to Austria. There, they were captured, and it was at this point that nearly all of France hated them. They were seen as traitors, and there was no going back from that. The royal family was returned to Tuileries and placed under serious guard. Despite being there and being under an intense watch, Marie found the time and the motivation to write her lover, Alex von Fersen. They communicated with one another through a system of enciphered text and invisible ink. Some of the letters actually show Marie trying to think of a way to restore the monarchy. But at a certain point, Marie realized it was nearing the end. She confessed her heartache and her anxiety to her lover, Fersen. Perhaps one of her most heartfelt letters was dated on the 28th of June, 1791. Marie writes, "I am alive here for my beloved, for the reason to adore you. Oh, how anxious I have been for you, and how sorry I am about all you must have suffered in having no news from us. May heaven grant that this letter reaches you. Do not write to me. This would compromise all of us, and above all, do not return any circumstances. It is known that it was you who helped us to get away from here. It all would be lost if you should show yourself. We are guarded day and night. I do not care. You are not here. Do not be troubled on my account, nothing will happen to me. Farewell, the most loved of men. Be quiet if you can. Take care of yourself, for myself. I cannot write any more, but nothing in the world could stop me from adoring you until death." At the very end of Marie's journey, she had one more blow to face. She was accused of incest and sexual abuse of her youngest son. Marie fought vigorously for her innocence in this accusation. After many weeks spent in prison, she wrote one final letter that would be sent to her sister-in-law, Madame Elizabeth. She wrote it just hours before her death. Marie writes, "Let them," her children, "both think of the lesson which I have never ceased to impress upon them, that the principles and the exact performance of their duties are the chief foundation of life, and that mutual affection and confidence in one another will constitute its happiness. Let my son never forget the last words of his father, which I repeat empathetically. Let him never seek to avenge our deaths." Marie would be killed by guillotine just a few short hours later. Even in the face of her own death, Marie Antoinette could not be more concerned about everyone other than herself. A joyous mother who cared for her children and their safety more than she feared for her own impending doom, Marie Antoinette's life was an experience of magnificent learning moments that shaped the world around her. Had it not been for her marriage into the royal French family, there would have never been a revolution. Marie Antoinette endured vicious treatment from the people of France, who wanted to judge her from the moment she arrived in Versailles at just 14 years old. The revolution was waiting for her.